Alright, looks like I'm going to be doing a primary gear reduction on the Big Red. Hours and hours of research over several days and buying a bunch of different gears on eBay, and it looks like I finally got a setup that's going to work here, which is the crank side primary gear out of a Honda 700XX and the clutch side gear out of a Honda like XL 175 from the 70s or something. This is 37 teeth and this is 74. All these other gears that you see here, you can see they're somewhat meshed, but that's just kind of eyeballed. Anyways, all these other gears here, this was just a random, off of eBay. It said it had 36 or 38 teeth, I can't remember now, so I thought it might work. But then when it got here, it's hard to judge on eBay, and they didn't have a part number, but the teeth are cut different than these teeth, and you can see they're much larger. I mean, I think these two are, maybe it's these two. One of these two is supposed to be only like one tooth off of this one. I think both of them are, ones on either side, but they're much larger. Teeth are cut different. These were both out of like 750, 700 street bikes, like V-twins. And I had the right tooth count, but they didn't work. I tried first as looking at that 34 tooth gear that's off of like a XL 600 from the 80s, and then these clutch baskets over here. One was a 69 tooth and one was a 70, and one goes with the 69 tooth goes with this 34 tooth gear. And that was out of the XL 600, and then the other one, the 60 or 70, had a smaller drive gear that I didn't get here, and it came off of around the same year, like XL 600R or something. It's basically the same bike, just a slightly different model. And I also got the torque converter and the primary gears from a Big Red. That's a 64 and 48 tooth, so it's like a 1.33 ratio, and the gears that I got to go on here are going to be a 2.0 ratio, so that'll be pretty good. And then all these numbers here are just basically I measured from here to here with my caliper, and then I measured the bores, and then divided those in half to get exact center and spacing, and did the same for these gears. And when you go through it and do all the math, it says there's 10 thousandths difference from center to center, so that ought to work quite well. The OE was slightly farther apart, so there's going to be about 10 thousandths more gap in these, but it looks like it should work. Eyeballing it, I really won't know until my new cutters for the lathe get here, because I've got to cut this gear off and then cut the inside out of this one, which it's got to be basically all the way back in here to get outside this lip. I'll cut that gear off, cut the inside of that out, and then nice tight press fit on here, and then weld it on. And then for this I've got to get these rivets out and then find rivets to replace it with, and take the rivets out of this one and put it on here. The first thing I'm going to do is get these apart and make sure spacing, eyeballing it, looks right for these to those. But as you can see, this one's got 6, and this one's got springs that sit in the pocket of the gear, and this one doesn't, so it's going to end up not having springs from the looks of things. But then I got to make sure these 3 line up with these 3, which it looks like they should, and from measuring it seems like they should, but these rivets actually look like they're bigger around too, so I'm going to drill those out and test it out first. I'll probably just cut the heads off of these to where I can slide this over what's left of the rivets, just to check on that and I just need to get these all out to the shop now and get back to work, or get to work on making them fit in all these other gears that I'm not going to use. I'm just going to put them back on eBay and hopefully somebody else needs them. I've got a new plan here. This is the one out of the Big Red, and this was the gear that with the 37 tooth was only going to be 10 thousandths difference from center to center. And after getting the rivets popped off of the clutch baskets and everything, you can see how this one just uses 6 little pins instead of 3 big ones, but that's not the big thing. I was hoping I'd still be able to cross it over, but it uses these little rubber buffers in here, and this hub is actually larger diameter. The hub's no big deal. I could have machined out a spacer, but using these rubber bumpers, there'd be no meat to them if I cleaned them up to where they'd fit around these, so we can use the 3 bigger rivets. And these weren't exactly centered on these. So I actually ended up getting a Yamaha gear, thinking I'd use that because it was be actually a lower ratio, because this is 74 teeth and this was 77. And then I had a 37 and I had a 34, so I figured, well, this one's going up as many teeth as that one's losing, so hopefully that should work. And well, it doesn't, because when you add a gear to the smaller one, it gets bigger quicker than the bigger one does. So instead of being 10 thousandths off, it was 80 thousandths off between these two. Too small. And then I tried it with a 37 just to see, and that's 80 thousandths over. And finding one of these that's 35 or 36 tooth instead of 34 is proven to be very difficult. So, new plan was I'm going to use the 37 and the 74, but instead of trying to mount it on here, because I would have had to machine it thinner too, because this actually, the way this sits on there is thinner than that one is. But the new plan is basically I will machine the inside of this out towards the same diameter of the outside of this gear, and then I'll set it over that gear and I'll weld them together. So we'll see how that works out, but that's the new current plan. On the torque converter, I've got it all chucked up in the lathe. And I mean, as hard as I can turn by hand, I can't make the one-way clutch slip. But when I actually take the cutting tooth and try cutting into it, I was able to make marks on where the diameter needs to be. And it's just barely in, but whenever I try actually cutting, this must be really hardened or something, because it won't hardly cut. And when I get enough pressure on it, it's probably because it's side load or something, the one-way bearing will actually slip. So then try something different. I actually tried just seeing if I could just cut from the outside and just work it down. Same type of thing. Anytime I start it doesn't really want to cut it. Anytime I start putting pressure on it to make it bite in harder, it just one-way clutch slips. So what I'm gonna end up doing is using the cutoff wheel, and I'll spin this on the lathe and hold the cutoff wheel in position to cut it. And then once I get that cut off, hopefully the in here softer, or if it's not, if I've got to trim it up a little bit, I can hopefully use the lathe to clean up the diameter. So that's where we're at. We're gonna give it a try. Hopefully I don't ruin it with the cutoff wheel or cut my face off. after a lot of time, got everything lathed out. So this one's gonna work. Just have to TIG weld that in. But this one, see how it sits up? There's a nice lip right here. Well, that was cut out a lot from the grinding wheel, but there's not much of a lip here. It's pretty much flush. And the problem I'm running into is I don't know about machining this housing back to make it sit in where it should, which actually it's a little bit smaller here than there, you can see, and that distance should be lipped over this. If I machine it down small enough for that, you can see there's basically going to be nothing left of this. And I can't offset it this way because the stator piece has to go in, and it can't go in all the way because that lip, so it won't go over here. So I didn't really take that into account when I was looking at stuff. And now I'm debating on what to do. Got it all together now. Everything's fitting properly. Ended up machining this down. It had a, out on the edge here is the original diameter, and then out here it actually had a step up by probably about 1/8 of an inch. So that's machined down, and that's all machined back, and it appears there's enough meat in this that it'll still be good with the one-way bearing in there. But it now goes in all the way. It now goes in all the way, and this can spin freely, and that can spin freely. So once we get it all welted up, we ought to be good. I took the seats and floor and all the plastic out so I can get to the front of the engine I need to change the gears out, and now I'm just gonna work on tearing into it. I'm not gonna really do video of the whole process because, well, it's just taking stuff apart, so it's not a huge thing. Just gonna take a little time, and when we get to the important stuff, I'll fire the camera back up. Alright, got all the other stuff out of the way. So we're down to the torque converter and the first clutch. I've already got the nuts off, so I just need to get the puller and pull them off and slide the other ones on to see. And just looking at currently looking how these gears are meshed, and then when I put the other ones in, I'll see how they mesh, and hopefully they mesh well, and then I'll finish weld them and put it all together and hope for awesomeness. This is how the one-way clutch is supposed to work, or one-way bearing. When I get the other one out, I'm going to check it and see, because it doesn't seem like it's doing that. So this may have been the bulk of my issue, according to, I don't know, websites and videos, but it worked fine otherwise. It's just really steep hills
or when I had a lot of load in it, it seemed like it would stall out and wouldn't be able to pull it. So it didn't seem like a one-way clutch, because this is supposed to be for engine braking, but this one is definitely bad. I shouldn't be able to spin it that way. That way goes easy. That way grips a little bit, but it shouldn't slip when I hold the torque converter. I should be able to grab the torque converter with one hand and that with the other, and it won't spin like what this one does. So that was definitely an issue, so good thing the new one works, but we're gonna go ahead and set the gears in there and see how they come out. I got both the gears fully welded up now. After welding that one up, it was slightly interfering with the stator shaft that has to go in there, so I used marking paint and marked it and rubbed it and marked it and spun it and marked it and spun it until it was no longer rubbing. And then yeah, got the other gear all welded up. On this side I didn't use any filler, just melted the old teeth down, blended them in. Should be good, we'll find out. I'm gonna go ahead and get these put in. And alright, got them all mounted down in there. There's a little more slop between the gears. That one, there we go. Not a lot, but a little bit more than there was with the other gears. But that's to be expected since they're 10 thousandths farther apart, center to center. I can't remember if I videoed this earlier or not, but there's a oil tube right there. You can see it's kind of notched out. Otherwise the gear would have hit it. Actually, the gear did hit it on the first test fit. So I just notched it out. It's just a return. There's no pressure or anything on it. It's just kind of like a flow passage, but the space underneath that drive shaft and the oil pump pickup down there, there's a gap where the oil runs back to the same spot that took it to. So because it's sitting fairly flat, the oil will still run across it and the rest can just go back the other way. Hopefully. We'll see how it works out. This is the other half of the cover here. This other half of the cover here where it's got notched out here too. That's from I was going to try and TIG a plate to where they'd just be about half the size and meet together, but to have the aluminum thin enough to where when it hit and even turn the amperage way down on my machine, the aluminum, the minute the edge started to melt, the whole thing would just shrivel up and fall away. So I just said, screw it, we're going to try it like this. Worst case scenario, doesn't get enough oil, it burns out the engine, and then I put something different in here, because if I can't get a gear reduction in the 700, it's just not going to work for me.